In the last 50 years of exploring Mars, we've gone from thinking maybe there were canals and aliens that had created this whole ecosystem, transporting water from the polar caps toward gigantic farms, to getting there and seeing these pictures of just cratered landscapes, the surface that's baked in radiation, barely an atmosphere to speak of, not a place that could sustain life as we know it.
We look at the planet Mars and it's this rusty red ball. And it doesn't look like it's a great place for life to live at all. You know, stagnant.
When I was a kid, Mars looked incredibly dead and it was boring. The end. Close the book, don't ever go back.
I think when the general public thinks of Mars, they imagine this dead red rock where we haven't found any evidence of life. So why do we keep exploring? Why do we keep sending these missions there?
It seems Mars has failed to live up to our dreams of finding life beyond Earth. But is that about to change? With NASA's Perseverance rover mission, we may finally find out if Mars once hosted organisms on its surface.
Perseverance, it is an entirely unfamiliar kind of mission. We've never done anything like this before.
This feels like a revolution right now in our understanding of Mars.
Whether Mars had life is the question. If it did start there, maybe life is really easy. If it didn't start there, maybe life is really hard.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars, ready to begin seeking the signs of past life.
Touchdown confirmed. We're going to wait for the images.
The second we landed, then we actually started getting to work because the images started coming down.
Perseverance is continuing to transmit. Yes!
Are we alone in the universe? And that's what we're trying to figure out. That's what exploration's all about.
In 2012, Perseverance's predecessor, Curiosity Rover, begins its mission to establish if Mars ever had an environment that could support life as we know it. The essential first step towards seeking life itself.
When Curiosity is driving around, it's driving over rocks that are billions of years old. Now, Curiosity is not designed to actually look for signs of life, but it most certainly can identify an environment that has everything that's necessary for life to be there. I'm interested in knowing if there are organic molecules in the rocks that we encounter.
Curiosity is the first rover with a miniature laboratory on board, capable of detecting organic molecules.
Organic material is critical for life as we know it. So if we don't find any on Mars, that's a huge deal.
Mars is just so inhospitable. The surface is being bombarded by ionizing radiation, which is not good for life or organic molecules. Not good. It tends to break them down. Every sample was a bit of a risk, scientifically, because we didn't know what we were going to come across. I mean, there were samples where we really didn't learn much of anything.
If we had the conditions for life to survive, we would expect to find organic material. We still hadn't seen any with Curiosity, and this was a big mystery. Was there never any organic material on Mars?
Our best hope was to just keep looking. We came across a bunch of cobbles and stones that were all rounded. And the best way of doing that is in a river. We realized there had been water flowing on the surface of Mars in the past. Then we knew we were on the right track. We were heading to where we thought the lake was. We saw these features, and they sort of indicated that there was shallow water Shallow water is a great place for life to do its thing, get immediately trapped into the sediments. So I was particularly interested in that sample. And when we drilled into the first rock, the sediment was dark gray. It hadn't been rusted like everything else you see on the surface of Mars. And there was a window into the past. There was organic matter in that rock, and that it had survived eons of ionizing radiation at the surface of Mars.
The discovery of organics is a huge step forward in establishing the habitability of Mars, but falls short of proving life ever existed there.
Finding organics is not proof of life on Mars at all. It's a nice hint, but we don't know whether these organic molecules actually rain down on the surface of Mars in the form of meteorites over time.
Okay, great. We finally have found organics on Mars, but it doesn't tell us anything about where those molecules came from and what they're doing there and what they mean to us.
Because of missions like Curiosity, we know that Mars was absolutely habitable. So the next question is, was it ever inhabited?
Back on Earth, a radical new mission is being prepared.
The goal of the Perseverance rover is to look for signs of ancient life on Mars. We finally put together the pieces of what Mars used to be like, and we know what evidence we need to definitively say whether there was or wasn't life on Mars. So Perseverance's goal is to take us to that next step.
The purpose of Perseverance rover mission is to find some ancient traces of life on Mars, and for that purpose, the instrument needs to be different from the Curiosity rover, and we need to have more techniques to meet this requirement. And that's a price to pay to be on board.
But how do you begin to unravel the clues that point to life? On the end of Perseverance's robotic arm is an instrument called Sherlock, designed to take Curiosity's investigations into organic molecules to the next level.
Curiosity has a mass spectrometer, and that's one way of detecting for organic molecules. What we do is something a little different. We are looking for spectral signatures. We shine a laser on a surface, and then we look at the backscattered light coming back, and how that light changes tells us what's in the surface. Detect and classify organic molecules on a very fine scale.
The astrobiologists are going crazy for this instrument because the wavelength at which the spectrometer operates is optimized for organics.
On the opposite side of the robotic arm from Sherlock is an instrument called Pixel, a radical reimagining of a geologist's most basic tool.
I sometimes refer to it as a chemical hand lens. The hand lens being the eyepiece a geologist uses to look at the rock. Imagine being able to look through that and see not just what the rock looks like, but also what it's made of.
Pixel uses spectroscopy to create a chemical map of the surface to reveal how life might have affected the rock.
In a way, it looks like a camera image, but it is really the fingerprints of the rock, and in turn, those fingerprints tell you the history of the rock, how it was formed, what environment it was in.
The Pixel instrument was something that arrived from doing field geology out in Western Australia one year, trying to look for evidence of life in the oldest rocks on Earth. I found that trying to figure out on Earth whether something that was in a rock that was possibly biological was actually biological was really helped by this instrument called an X-ray microscope. It's like a pretty decent-sized beach ball. It's connected to the mains power, and of course, if anything goes wrong with it, then you get a crew come out to fix it. The most challenging aspect of building Pixel is the not being able to break. You have to be able to get it off the surface of Earth to Mars, land on the surface of Mars, and then survive on Mars for the entire prime mission and hopefully well beyond. All of that had to be done in addition to getting it down from 80 centimetres cubed to about 20 centimetres cubed. There were certainly moments where it was like, oh my God, how complicated is this becoming?
Tailoring these precision instruments for a future on Mars is a daunting engineering challenge, even for those who have been there before.
Oh, to develop an instrument from Mars is pretty easy. You just have to worry about every single thing, down to the bolts and where the bolts go and where the bolts don't go. Most instruments that are Sherlock-like do not like vibration, and we're attached to a drill that vibrates. The temperature swings on Mars every day is 100 degrees Celsius. Electronics really don't like to be hot, then cold, then hot, then cold, then hot, then cold every single day.
And the brutality of the Martian atmosphere is matched by the trauma of the spaceflight that will get them there.
We do testing, informally known as shake and bake, right? Because you want to shake it and you want to heat it.
Everything that goes into space has to be really thoroughly tested. You could almost say violently tested. We vibrate it at different frequencies and make sure no screws come loose, nothing falls apart.
When I saw the shaking, I was like, my God, what about the optical alignments? It's a bit heartbreaking to see your instrument suffering like that.
The jewel in the crown of Perseverance's instruments is the eye-catching SuperCam.
SuperCam is often described as the head of the rover, and it is. It's sort of this Cyclops laser eye.
SuperCam's long-range, rock-busting laser could make all the difference in the search for life.
We can shoot the laser at a rock up to 7 meters away from the rover. So we can actually analyze things all around us without having to drive up to it.
The rock gets literally zapped, and the atoms come screaming off at 10,000 degrees in a plasma. And then with that Cyclops eye, we collect some of that light. We can tell what are the chemical elements that are present in that rock.
It blows my mind that a scientist in a lab one day thought, let's blow up rocks with lasers and see what they're made out of. And now we're doing this on Mars.
Just below SuperCam are 2 stereoscopic cameras, the key to navigating Martian terrain, with the driver using special 3D glasses.
So as a rover driver, I'll put on my 3D goggles, and getting the 3-dimensional data allows you to really visualize the terrain in order to determine if something's a hazard. And on Perseverance, the cameras are fantastic, very high resolution, so we'll be able to see a lot further.
The complex optics for SuperCam and the entire head of Perseverance are made in Toulouse by the French space agency, CNES. At the end of 2018, the launch is in sight. But the future of NASA's Cyclops Eye is about to be thrown into doubt.
We had a phone call every Tuesday with GPL. We had a small modification to do on the instrument just before delivery.
We were actually on the phone talking about final touches that they were doing on this beautiful masterpiece.
And it happened during this phone call. My test team in Toulouse called me saying, we have a big problem.
The last stage of the modification to SuperCam is to heat-treat the glue used during final assembly.
To make sure that the bonding is done correctly, we put the instrument into a small oven and we bake it at 50 degrees Celsius. That's what we did. But we had an issue with the hardware, the thermal chamber.
The thermocouple in that furnace broke, went to its maximum temperature.
It was a disaster. Basically, we destroyed all the optical parts of the mast unit 2 months before delivery to JPL. I was still on the phone call with JPL.
We started to realize that the people on the phone in France were very distracted. They said, this thing is destroyed. And we had just a few months to go.
If something breaks on your flight model, that could actually end your mission.
part of the problem is the launch window for Mars opens up every 26 months. If we miss this launch opportunity, we got to wait 26 more months.
Probably Mars 2020 will launch without us. But that's where we are. Now, what can we do?
SuperCam is a write-off. The team's only hope of hitting the launch deadline is to somehow repurpose existing hardware. And they have one chance to pull this back.
In parallel to building the SuperCam flight unit, we were also building a laboratory unit, almost identical, so we could do experiments on Earth during the mission. We had to take that laboratory unit and try to make it flight-worthy.
But we had to constrain everything in 6 months instead of 1 year taken to build the first model.
It is really a last-ditch effort. It was like, oh, we've gotten this far, and then we're not going to make it.
We had to work days and nights, the weekend and everything. But in 6 months, we had a new SuperCam mass unit. Honestly, I'm so happy to see the performance of the instruments. It's really a perfect instrument.
As Perseverance is packed and prepared for launch, the mission is entering its most uncertain phase, where history has lessons for those choosing to visit other worlds.
Getting to Mars is no easy task. You have 2 moving targets, Earth and Mars, and then you're throwing in the third moving target of the thing you're trying to get from one planet to the next at thousands of miles an hour. Schiaparelli was a technology demonstration, a tiny lander that was Europe's first attempt to land on the surface of Mars.
Everything had been going right up till the point of parachute deploy. Supersonic parachute inflation, that's a very violent event. It was swinging too fast underneath the parachute. Couldn't figure out which way it was up. Unfortunately for Schiaparelli, it was like stealing defeat from the jaws of victory.
Schiaparelli ended up smashing into the surface of Mars and left a nice little splot in the dust that we could see from orbit.
Schiaparelli hit the ground going much faster than it was designed to do, and we call that creating a new crater on Mars. And we felt, really horrible for them, because, there's years of work that went into that.
It was a terrible feeling. It was just like another crash on Mars, and we could be next.
The team on Perseverance looked at Schiaparelli as very much a reminder of just how hard this really is.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The 58-meter-tall Atlas rocket is only just powerful enough to deliver the 1 metric ton rover to Mars at its closest approach. Even so, the journey will take 7 months.
Yeah! Woo!
In the meantime, investigators turn their attention to the landing site that they believe offers the best opportunity for finding ancient life. Jezero Crater is tucked along the western edge of one of the largest basins in the northern hemisphere.
If there was ever life on Mars, then a place like Jezero is going to be spot on, absolutely perfect to preserve evidence of life.
Jezero has long been on the list of top possible landing sites because it looks like there was a long-lasting lake, a body of water. But the problem is that incredible topography is also incredibly dangerous for spacecraft.
If you look at Jezero, there are just so many hazards. There's a delta with really steep clipped walls.
Scientists want to go to places that have a lot of topography, that have a lot of rocks. But as a guy who's trying to land a rover safely there, when you look at all those things, you just see danger.
Perseverance has a new technology called terrain relative navigation that recognizes hazards on the ground and takes avoiding action.
And terrain relative navigation means that Perseverance can tell whether there's a mound or there's a hill or there's some other thing that the rover could possibly land on that would be bad, and it steers the rover away from that. And that's the only reason we could land in Jezero Crater.
Without this navigation system, you should expect that about 20% of the time, you're not going to make it.
Although the new technology has been tested extensively on Earth, this will be its first time operating in concert with the entire landing system.
It's humbling, right, to realize that the first time you get a chance to use your whole system is going to be when it has to work at Mars.
On February 18th, 2021, Perseverance is poised to enter the Martian atmosphere. Now, 293 million miles from Earth, the delay in communication means the spacecraft must act autonomously during the 7 minutes it will take to land.
That's 7 minutes from when you hit the top of the atmosphere, going 12,000 miles an hour, till we touch down. There's literally nothing we can do. We're just finding out what has already happened about 11.5 minutes ago.
We have spent more than 6 years developing the instrument, and you know that in 7 minutes, everything can change. Either you have the rover on Mars, or you lose everything in 7 minutes.
Perseverance is on her own, but sends status updates back to Earth in the form of a tonal code, similar to musical notes.
So it's kind of like it's singing a little song to us on the way down. And each of those notes means something different. You know, if you hit this note, that means we deployed the parachute. Or if you hit this other note, it means something has really gone bad with something.
You wait for that telemetry to come back and see what it tells you. And if you're not getting the readings that you expect, your heart just sinks into the pit of your stomach.
10 minutes before we get to the top of the atmosphere, she tells us that something's gone wrong with one of the electronics boxes, one of the computers.
All stations at this point, let's limit our traffic on the net to critical issues only.
If Perseverance was right that something was wrong with that box, we would lose the ability to fire thrusters, and the propulsion system not working would be certain death.
Perseverance is actually being pulled in by gravity and accelerating.
The mission would be over, no question.
There's a lot of silence in the room. Everybody's monitoring that telemetry so carefully, knowing that we'd done everything we could, and yet this belief that it'll recover, and we continue to have a mission.
That vehicle slams into the atmosphere, going about 5.4 kilometers per second. On the outside of the vehicle, we're getting white hot like the sun. All we can do is take a look at what Perseverance is telling us and worry. Are your engines really going to work? Or are we about to fall to our death? Luckily, the spacecraft began to do things that were consistent with the box working, because all of our thrusters seem to be working fine. So, crisis averted for the moment, but it definitely got our hearts beating.
The navigation has confirmed that the parachute has deployed, and we are seeing significant deceleration.
We had cameras all over the place looking up at the parachute. This was extraordinary. This was a documentary.
Our current velocity is 480 meters per second at an altitude of about 12 kilometers from the surface of Mars.
We're approaching at the mercy of the winds and of the whims of the rockets. If we happen to land on a too large a rock, the mission is over.
Heat shield set.
Perseverance is now slowed to subsonic.
Our new system called terrain relative navigation allows Perseverance on her own to figure out exactly where she is by taking pictures of the ground and matching them up with an onboard map. We light up rocket engines on that jetpack to slow us down and steer us to the nearest safe spot that we can find.
Our velocity is about 75 meters per second at an altitude of about a kilometer.
But right after that, you can hear one of my teammates call out TRN safety level Bravo.
TRN safety Bravo.
What that was telling us was that terrain relative navigation has done its job, but the best place that it could land was not the best case scenario. It could no longer go to where we had originally targeted. That causes us to freak out again. Suddenly, you're thinking, oh, my chances just dropped to 1 in 20 that we're going to die at touchdown. Perseverance flew about 600 meters to the southeast to reach it. If one thing goes wrong, it's game over.
Skycrane maneuver has started.
20 meters above the ground. We deploy the rover and its wheels below that rocket-powered jetpack.
You have so much riding on this. Like whether as a rover driver, you're actually going to have a job, all depends on this landing.
It's nerve-wracking the whole time. All of those little black things that were coming by the camera, I called those projectiles that might have hit my instrument. That's the fear.
We had our fingers crossed all the way through touchdown that we had found a safe spot.
That Skycrane let the rover touch the ground and then cut the cables and fly away.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars.
People are jumping up and down, elated. So to some people, landing looked perfect. But I mostly just felt a massive sense of relief.
As soon as they gave us a coordinate, we were able to load where the rover is. You're like, what is Jezero like? You're curious about seeing the terrain. You put on the 3D goggles and it really transports you as if you're on Mars, standing there from the perspective of the rover's cameras. It's very immersive. Jezero was really spectacular from the first image that came down. I think I did that for hours.
Once we landed, the first thing I said to my engineering team was, oh God, now it has to work. So our stress, started increasing.
The investigators run calibration checks on the instruments to see if they've survived the landing and test the lasers on nearby rocks.
They went for a target just a few feet in front of the rover, made a nice target because we couldn't miss. We were crossing our fingers, praying that everything's going to work. When we saw the atomic emission spectra, that was the moment of truth.
The spectra reveal that the test rock is a basalt, common in ocean basins on Earth and across Mars. The result confirms their hunch that this was once an ancient lake. But there's nothing to suggest life ever existed here in the landing zone. However, Perseverance is just a few kilometers from the spectacular features that brought it to Jezero Crater.
So we landed right in front of a river delta. And what we're going to do is drive up this river delta, and along the way, we're going to take samples and do scientific analysis on the rocks.
A delta forms when you have a river that empties into some kind of standing body of water. And all of the material that was being transported by that river stops moving and sinks to the bottom and forms these layers.
Our experience from previous missions is that this fine-grained material is good for finding clay minerals, which might then contain organic molecules.
You can think about water being trapped in little ponds and puddles around the place. That's the kind of complexity that can eventually tell you or lead to the discovery of life.
The delta has been dry for probably 3.5 billion years. But how would it have looked when water still flowed?
I imagine if I was sitting on the edge of Jezero Crater, just looking out over the lake when it was there 4 billion years ago, you would have this very peaceful environment. You might hear the sound of the river coming into the lake on the side where the delta is. It would probably just be this beautiful place. I would love to think that maybe there were some kind of fish or algae living in there. I would love to see us discover a fossil of some kind of plant, even if it's really unlikely. You never know. I wouldn't count it out.
We know that Mars was once a very different planet. But there has been a lot of changes happened on Mars since Jezero Crater was formed and since that huge freshwater lake was deposited. Mars today, it's drier than the driest places on Earth. In addition, the very extreme incoming radiation would be an incredibly harsh environment, even for the most hardy microbes on Earth.
But how did Mars become so hostile to life? The answer will give clues about where traces might still exist. And investigators have focused on a critical period when Mars had a molten planetary core, like Earth does today.
Inside Earth, we have a molten core, and that spins around and generates outside of the planet the magnetic field. And that magnetic field protects our planet from the blast of ionizing solar wind coming off of our sun. Protects us, protects the whole biosphere. Now on Mars, it had that molten center just like Earth does today, but something happened on Mars where that started to solidify. Around 3.9 billion years ago, all of a sudden the magnetic field stopped and the solar wind blasted the atmosphere away. It literally blows it away. The moment the magnetic field was gone, ionizing radiation had a huge impact on the surface. And forevermore, Mars was a completely unique, different place.
Perseverance rover has a top speed of just 0.1 miles per hour. And the journey to the Delta is expected to take 2 years. But before the search for life can begin, Perseverance drives to a nearby flat expanse of regolith, where it will drop off a passenger.
Perseverance didn't go to Mars alone. It took with it this tiny little drone called Ingenuity.
Underneath the belly, Ingenuity is sitting sideways. The legs swing down, and then we drop to the surface. And from that moment on, there's no way to come back to the rover and reattach the umbilical. Our mission had begun.
This 1.8 kilogram experimental helicopter could prove invaluable as an aerial scout in the search for life, if it works.
There's a lot of challenges when it comes to flying an aircraft on Mars. One, the atmosphere, it's very thin. It's 1% that of Earth's atmosphere. There's almost nothing to generate lift with.
Back in 2014, the first prototype struggled to deal with the simulated Martian atmosphere created in JPL's laboratory. So how will it cope on Mars?
It's as if you operated it on Earth at 100,000 feet at 20 miles high and tried to fly.
Ingenuity was a total mystery to us. Was it going to work?
It doesn't carry any science payload. The one and only purpose of Ingenuity is to prove that we can fly on Mars.
And Martian weather is the wild card that could make or break Ingenuity.
Mars can be a gusty place, and so we were not sure how that turbulence might affect this helicopter.
And perhaps the biggest threat to Ingenuity is from Martian tornadoes.
We did see some pictures of Ingenuity with a dust devil in the background. Dust devils could probably do a number on that helicopter.
So today's the day of our first flight on the surface of Mars. We have sent the commands up the day before, and everyone's holding their breath. Definitely very nerve-wracking.
Equations tell you that you can get lift if you make it light enough, if you make the propellers big enough, but can you control the flight? That's another story.
Even taking off would have been a massive success. The sheer power of the rotor system to fight itself off the surface and produce lift, it was awe-inspiring. The plan for the first flight is take off, hover, come back down and land. That's it.
Yeah! Woo! It came down on its feet, not on its side, and so we were really applauding.
This is big relief. We did it. Our mission is successful. We have proven we can fly on Mars.
Ingenuity is now off scouting for the rover. One of my absolute favorite ideas is to descend through a skylight hole into a lava tube cave on Mars. That was never thought to be feasible before this Ingenuity mission.
The fact that we flew this helicopter, this drone helicopter on Mars was really awesome for all of us.
NASA's faith in Ingenuity has given them an eye in the Martian sky. Now the search for signs of ancient life can begin. But what exactly should Perseverance be looking out for?
Scientists have been trying to define what life is for decades, and they still are talking about it. So there is no one clear definition.
The problem with looking for life is there's a lot of problems with it. The definition of life, it always uses the phrase alive somewhere in the definition of it, which is kind of circular, and it doesn't make any sense.
Looking for life on Mars, we have to make certain key assumptions. It would be really hard to recognize a form of life we've never imagined or encountered before. So we start looking for something familiar.
But the problem is that even here on Earth, where we have plenty of life to study, it's really hard to actually tell the difference between chemistry, complex chemistry, and life.
My idea of life is organisms actually change the environment. They do things. It's not like they deliberately think about doing this, but life chooses certain things that it wants. So when we go look for life, I look for indications of something very specific. That wouldn't be there if it weren't for life needing that specific thing.
One thing that the investigators can agree on is that the clues that point to possible ancient life are called biosignatures.
Biosignatures are things that are left behind by life. So the thing that was alive to have produced whatever you're looking at isn't necessarily there anymore, but you can tell it was there based on traces that it left.
We're trying to find potential biosignatures, so we want to look for places that at one point had what we think life needs. So we're looking for hydrothermal material, minerals that could only be created in hydrothermal vents. We're looking for carbonates. We're looking for things that we know on Earth biology likes. If we found something that looked like a hydrothermal vent, we would stop and look at it for months, I would hope.
Hydrothermal vents that result from volcanic activity are associated with life processes on Earth. But Perseverance is also looking out for bulbous rock structures called stromatolites, a feature of Earth's most ancient landscapes.
So stromatolites are great because they're macroscopic. And I think they're like the tip of the iceberg that alerts you to, oh, hey, look here.
They are really rock formations, but they have within them organic carbon mixed with the rock layers that were the sediments.
Life on the Earth tends to clump, and on Mars we would expect the same thing. Lakes lay down layers, they lay them down flat. It's hard to imagine without biology how those things grow.
So life can alter the appearance of rocks, a biosignature carved into the landscape. But on Earth, microbes can also affect the abundance of certain minerals in rocks. Could the same be true on Mars?
When you think about the things that life needs to survive, you probably think of water, maybe plants living off sunlight, but there are actually microbes that can live off of eating rocks.
If you ask a different scientist, you'll get a different answer. But my particular biosignature of interest is a family of minerals that are high in the element manganese. here on Earth, microbes absolutely love manganese because it has a lot of really critical chemical properties that they can use to actually do their metabolism.
Microorganisms have this amazing ability to adapt. They are capable of getting energy in so many unique ways. Give them a rock and they'll figure out how to use it.
On Earth, high concentrations of manganese oxide have been linked to the presence of ancient microbial life. And a similar overabundance of this mineral has already been found on Mars by earlier missions.
These minerals tend to form little bumps and crusts. You'll just roll up to a new spot and suddenly there is manganese.
And now Perseverance is discovering signs of more deposits.
As we look through SuperCam data, we can see that there is manganese in these rocks in Jezero Crater. It literally is the very first time we shot a rock. You could see manganese in it. You know, this is very intriguing. It's not proof that life did this on Mars, but we can start looking for other things that can start building that case that maybe life made these materials.
Perseverance's instruments are designed to recognize the subtle imprint of microbial life and the familiar chemistry of organic molecules. But the devastating effects of ionizing radiation add another level of complexity to the challenge of locating biosignatures.
We joke about the fact that it's planet bleach. Life as we know it needs water, an energy source, and organic carbon. But Mars is a very bad environment for a lot of organic molecules.
If there was life there, would that site have preserved the evidence in a way that we can find it today?
The challenges facing the robotic search for life on Mars may appear overwhelming, but Perseverance has come prepared to tip the odds in its favor.
If we're going to find evidence of life on Mars, we may get incredibly lucky and do it on Mars, but far, far more likely, it's going to be in a laboratory with proper equipment back on Earth. And so Perseverance is an entirely unfamiliar kind of mission. Yes, we're driving around, we're looking at rocks, we're doing science on rocks, but it's being done to select samples, take small drill cores from those samples, put them in hermetically sealed containers, and leave them behind for a future mission that is only now being planned, an international mission to retrieve and bring back to Earth, hopefully within the next decade.
A sample is about the size of your index finger, and then you go and you unleash all the power of laboratories on Earth and try and look at the even smaller scale.
This is really important because we can actually take those samples and look for signs of DNA in them. And DNA is irrefutable proof of life. We can tell you that it was not something that came from Earth, it was something completely native to the red planet.
Perseverance's instruments work together to identify potential samples for return. But trying to operate completely new hardware on Mars is proving to be an ongoing challenge.
The stress never gets any less. We're turning ourselves on today, and we're going to do some spectroscopy on the surface. I'm petrified that it's not going to work. I used to have an old car, and every time I would go out and turn the old car on, it's the same feeling. Is this the time the car is not going to start?
Mars is living up to its reputation as an unforgiving host, where even the night itself is just another hazard to contend with.
What happens is, as soon as the sun goes down, the temperature plummets. The metal that the rover's made of starts to contract. And it's like the arm starts to move and drift around, and that drift was actually not at all trivial.
Pixel needs 17 hours to create its detailed microscopic maps of rock surfaces. And the sample must remain motionless under the sensor for the whole period, which created a headache for engineers during the development of Pixel.
So we actually had to invent a new thing called a hexapod, like a six-legged device, legs that would sort of get longer and shorter to make sure that you can stay the right distance from the rock and actually stay over the right part of the rock.
The ingenious engineering is put to the test 7 months into the mission, when the team must decide on where to drill for a sample core. The first stage is to grind a clean surface so the rock can be tested.
It's really cool because you see a rock that's completely different than the rock you see on the outer surface. It's pristine, it's not weathered, it's not dusty.
You can see individual crystals. They're not tiny, they're actually really big. It looks like it's a volcanic rock. But there are some other smaller features that are a little bit harder to resolve. We have to go for a closer look.
When Pixel scans the surface, 4 billion years of history is exposed.
Pixel can make us an incredible map of the chemistry of this area. We can see that these smaller features appear to be salts.
Crucially, the presence of salts means the rock has spent time underwater. But what nobody is expecting is the presence of calcium phosphate.
What's so interesting about calcium phosphates is that they form in some very unusual environments on Earth. And in general, they're very closely associated with life. Phosphates have never before been discovered on Mars. And so that makes them incredibly intriguing to discover in Jezero Crater.
The team decides to drill for a rock core to return to Earth. This sample could rewrite Mars' history. And some believe that the salts could even contain a microscopic horde of lake water.
These types of salty materials in rocks can preserve traces, little bubbles of water from when there was more water, when these materials were being emplaced in the rock. And so these little bubbles of water can preserve organic materials. So it's worth a look in these Martian samples.
The rock sample is stored, ready to be dropped off. The first of more than 30 tubes destined for Earth laboratories. The next step in solving a mystery that began perhaps 4 billion years ago.
All of a sudden, Mars goes through this incredibly dramatic change. Something on a planetary scale that we haven't experienced on Earth. Did life survive if it had been there? Life does things with its environment. We're looking for signs that organisms are actually influencing what's around them in a way that their natural environment wouldn't do so on its own.
The whole biosphere has affected the planet, have affected the mineral formation, everything. And that has got to be recorded in the rock, some way, shape or form, I think. There should be something that we can decode from that. It might take decades.
Mars is an entire planet, a planet like Earth, full of diversity of all kinds of things we can't imagine. So in a way, what I expect is the unexpected.
I'd like to know why Mars didn't have life or why Mars did have life. We're an exploration species and we want to know where we fit in the entire universe. Either answer is wonderful.
Are we alone? Is there life out there? Or is life so special that it's only here on Earth? We might find evidence of that randomness that defines the non-biological world.
If there is evidence of life having once existed on Mars, then that tells us that life can exist on a planet and then it can disappear. That's the reason why we're doing this. Can't rely on your planet to always provide your home.
Every time we look at Mars in a different way, we discover something grand. But do I think that the samples have evidence of life in them? It depends on what day you ask me.